Story 1. The Doll. 3 years ago, I had been asked by my employers to retrieve a particular item, but that day I walked away with more than just a mere trinket. I had been employed for several years at an antique store called A Moment in Time, and I liked my work. I got to meet many interesting people and encounter rare items of just as much interest. Often my elderly employers, a married couple known as the Hudsons, would send me out to pick up items that had been donated to the store. Sometimes the trip was just a few blocks away, and other times I had to leave the city for the outskirts. In the end, my final trip out would take me further than I had ever imagined possible. The item pickup seemed simple enough. Go to the house, pick up the trunk, and bring it back to the shop. But when I finally got the house that day, it was anything but simple. As I drove deeper into the forest and onto the large property, the birds stopped singing, the insects stopped buzzing, and even the wind seemed to come to a halt. The house had clearly been abandoned and had been so for some time. What was once a gorgeous two-story log cabin on the edge of the lake was now a decaying structure overgrown with wild vines and uncut weeds that blocked out the windows. On the first floor, the roof was blackened by a fire, and a large gaping hole in the roof that surely allowed the elements to decimate the interior just as severely as the exterior. Moving through the thick weeds, following what was left of the front walk, I knocked on the door but received no response. I knocked again, but there was no denying that no one was in the house. I checked the faded numbers of the houses addressed to the information that I had been given. It was the correct house. As I put my hand on the doorknob, it fell from the rotten door and landed on the wooden porch with a loud thud. The door slowly reeked open on its own. I peeked inside and looked around and saw nothing moving. More vines snaked along the floor like a natural carpet. There was no furniture in the whole house. All that was left was a broken grandfather clock and the long dormant fireplace. I could see that the windows in the distant kitchen area were broken and dirty. There was a single bedroom that was also empty. Small circles on the dirty floor indicated that furniture had once been in the room, but removed recently, it seemed. The adjoining bathroom was a mess. The pipes were no longer dripping as rust and crust hid the leaks. The medicine cabinet mirror had been broken. Checking the closets, I found nothing but a stray wire coat hanger. On the wall of the kitchen there was a phone. I picked it up and listened to the receiver, but I heard nothing. No dial tone. No busy signal, only silence. I hung the phone up. I called out again, but the house remained silent, except for my own footsteps against the warped wooden floorboards. The staircase itself was its own story. The vines engulfed the side of the stairs and wrapped up the banister. Most of the steps were cracked and splintered. Her steps were missing entirely. An ominous thought entered my mind. Who put the trunk up for donation? As I ascended the stairs, I couldn't help but feel like someone was watching me. My skin began to crawl with building uneasiness. The second floor was a room all its own, extending the entire width and length of the house itself. The hole in the roof shone a single intense beam of sunlight when the wide tree branches over the house would allow the light's passage. In the center of this beam of light was a single trunk. I took a step toward the trunk and heard the rapid steps of a small child running behind me. I froze and looked over my shoulder. Quickly, but saw nothing, and all fell silent again. I called out but received no reply, wanting to get the true neck and get out of that house as fast as I could. I kneeled down in front of the trunk and checked the lock, but it was secured. I wiped the sweat from my face and looked around in a feeble attempt to find some sort of tool to pry open the lock. As my eyes left the trunk, the lock began to loudly rattle. I jumped back and stared at the trunk, my heart pounding hard in my chest. With my shaking hand, I tested the lock again, and this time it was loose. I removed the lock from the trunk and took a deep breath as I slowly opened the lid. Inside the trunk I found what looked like scraps of newspaper and a single red velvet bag. I opened the bag and pulled out a porcelain doll. I held it in my hands and studied it, the uneasy feeling returning with a vengeance. The dew lines itself seemed so otherworldly. It was a doll of a small girl. She was wearing black and white saddle shoes and white stockings, with a snow-white circular-brimmed hat on her head. Her dress was white as well, reaching down to the doll's knees and halfway down her arms. A red sash was tied at the doll's waist with a red barrette clipped in her hair. Her hair was the deepest blacker than charcoal. Her hair reached down to her waist, and it had bangs cut just over where her eyes should have been. The doll's face was blank. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a blank canvas that was even whiter than her dress. I carefully slipped the doll back into the bag and set it on the floor beside me. Slipping my hand back into the trunk, I checked it for other items, but found only more scrap newspapers. At least I thought they were scrap. I caught a glimpse of a strange picture in the scraps and saw that it was an old article clipped from the newspaper. The article told of a mysterious fire that happened in the house, how there was no explanation ever given, and the case was still being investigated. Another article spoke of mysterious animal deaths on the property. A T-heard clip spoke of a little girl drowning. On each article I picked up spoke of one tragedy after another, all happening at the house or its property. The dates stretched back as far as 70 years. And in every photo that accompanied the articles I saw the same name of the person who was reportedly responsible for all the tragedies, Carolyn, as well as the same object, the doll. I felt a chill go up my spine. I reached for the velvet bag with the doll, but my hand only found the floor. I looked down at the bag was gone. A thump from behind caught my attention. I turned around and saw the bag in the middle of the floor. Outlined in the bag was the form of the doll sitting upright. Now my heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my head. I grabbed the doll, tossed it in the trunk, slammed the lid, and dragged the entire thing down the stairs. As I dragged the trunk through the front door, the itself somehow slammed shut on its own. It was a struggle to lift the trunk into the back of the truck, but I managed to do it thanks to the fear-induced adrenaline. The drive back to the shop seemed to take even longer than before. All the while I kept looking in the rearview mirror at the truck in the pickup bed. Whenever I looked away, I would hear a bizarre scratching noise, like a tree branch dragging against the roof of a house. As soon as I pulled into the parking lot of the store, I ran in to inform my bosses of the delivery. Mrs. Hudson would see I was upset. She sat me down and asked me to tell her what happened. While Mr. Hudson went to check on the trunk. Before I could even begin my story, I heard Mr. Hudson's weak voice call for help as he hit the gravel of the parking lot with Mrs. Hudson. At my side, I knelt down next to him and checked his neck for a pulse, but I couldn't find one. He was dead. Mrs. Hudson began to panic, so I told her to run back inside and call 911 while I helplessly attempted CPR. I looked around, trying to figure out what caused Mr. Hudson's collapse, when I noticed that the trunk had been opened. The lid was being held open by the lock that had been bent at an odd angle. On the inside of the lid of the trunk were tiny scratches, almost like claw marks, as if something or someone had been locked inside. The EMTs and police arrived at the shop, but it was too late. Mr. Hudson had died from an apparent massive heart attack. As the ambulance pulled away with Mr. Hudson's body, and the police took Mrs. Hudson aside for questions, I cautiously approached the Ned trunk. Inside the trunk was the bag with the doll. It was again sitting upright. I opened the bag and took out the doll. Small abrasions and dirt covered the doll's small hands and fingers. They matched perfectly with the marks on the lid of the trunk. The brittle paper that had been clawed began to flake away, revealing the ancient wood beneath. Strange markings marred the wood, like a burn head engraving. I cleared away the paper and saw a name, Carolyn. I put the doll back in the trunk and tried to slam the lid shut, but it wouldn't close anymore. Unable to cope with the loss of her husband, Mrs. Hudson closed down the shop. She died of a stroke 2 weeks later. As for Carolyn, the name I had given the doll, I couldn't get her out of my mind. I would dream of a faceless girl every night, and I would hear tiny footsteps running through my apartment at all hours of the day. Whenever I drove by the closed-down antique shop, I would see her standing in the window, starting out, staring with her blank eyes. I put her eBay along with the trunk and the newspaper articles. As soon as she was purchased, my nightmares stopped and my apartment was quiet. But the most disturbing image that Carolyn left behind was the picture I had taken of her when I put her up for auction. At first the image seemed normal, and it remained as such until she had been shipped away. I went to delete the now unnecessary photo from my laptop when I saw in the thumbnail that the doll's face was different. Her eyes were black hollows, and she had painted ruby red lips that were twisted slightly upward in a sinister grin. I clicked on the thumbnail to enlarge the image, but when I did, the face returned to its blank expression of nothingness. I deleted the image from my computer, but I couldn't get her eyes or her smile out of my mind. Story 2. Children of God. Many of you reading this will believe it's a work of fiction, but I'm currently sitting in my friend's room while I type this, both of us terrified of what might happen next. The only thing I can tell you for certain is that every word of this is true. If something happens to me, I need to know that people know about what happened. It's the first day of summer vacation, and I was feeling nostalgic this morning. I thought about my K-5 school and all the good times I had there. It's a small private school called Children of God Elementary. I felt the strangest urge to see the school again. I didn't know why I wanted to see it or what I would do when I got there, but I still wanted to see it. I was too embarrassed to tell my parents that I wanted to see the school again, so I told them that I was gonna hang out with my friends downtown, and they gave me the key. As to the van, I've moved houses since I went to Children of God, so it was a bit of a drive. I stopped at a convenience store and bought food for the trip. Because I wasn't in school, the man behind the counter was confused. I was in a different state by now, where school doesn't get out until June 15th. So I explained that my school gets out the beginning June. You have any plans for the summer? The man behind the counter said in an apologetic tone. I explained my idea to see my old school, and the man said slowly, Children of God. I would stay away from that school if I were you. See, there were these teachers a while back. They showed this movie to the kids called The Heavens Above. It was some odd movie about an angel kid who lives on Earth. The school hired a small animation crew to make the movie specificity for them. Kids were terrified of it, and when parents threatened to sue, the school said it was an accurate depiction of how God works. The man stared right past me as if he had completely lost track of where he was at the moment. He took a deep sigh and continued, anyways, that was years ago. I'm sure all that's past. You be careful, son. I thanked him and headed back into my car. I didn't want to go to the school just to get wrapped up in nostalgia. Now I wanted to find that movie. I crossed state lines again into Ohio and soon into my hometown. Not much had changed. The streets had been touched up, but that's about it. But eventually, I made it to Children of God. I looked at it in a whole new light. Now I came there to be hit with a wave of nostalgia. But all I wanted to do was go inside, by any means necessary, and find that movie. To my surprise, the door wasn't locked. I felt wrong walking in, but my curiosity was piqued. If anyone had found me, I would just say that I was lost and I was looking for someone who could direct me back towards town. I stepped into the school and felt a warm breeze hit me. Each step I took echoed throughout the entire building. I walked through the hallways, passing each of my old childhood classrooms. I realized that I could probably find where they kept their VHSs. I started opening closets until I found them. I went through nearly 15 closets of just mops, storage, and textbooks. But eventually I found it. I opened the door and 3 VHSs clattered onto the floor. The closet was packed to the limit, and then some with tapes. The movies were mostly religious cartoons that would be at any private elementary school. After digging through dozens of tapes, I found it. The label read, The Heavens Above Original Movie. I sat down and just looked at the tape for a while. It had a white case, which was not very common. Eventually, I decided to head back to my car with the tape. If anyone had found me now, I couldn't lie and say I was lost, so I had to get out as fast as possible. Right when I had gotten in to my car, I saw the blinds move in the windows of the school. My heart started pounding as I pressed the gas pedal and got out of the parking lot. I had gone about 10 miles before I calmed down. If that person saw my face, I could have easily been charged with breaking and entering and robbery. And yet, at the time, it felt worth it to get this tape. There was something about it that just seemed so missed. It took me another 4 hours, and crossing through to states again, but I finally made it home. As soon as I pulled into my driveway, I realized that I sold my VCR about 2 months ago. I called up my friend who is a VCR and asked him if I could come over to his place. Of course, I didn't tell him that I stole the tape, I told him I found it at a flea market. I came over to his house and we put the tape in. There was roughly 10 to 15 seconds of static before anything happened. My friend turned his head and said with a smirk, "I think you got ripped off." I didn't take my eyes off the screen, though, and soon enough the movie started. A title card came up that said "The Heavens Above," presented by Children of God Elementary, with a blue sky in the background. Children of God. "Isn't that where you went?" my friend asked. "Yeah," I said, needless to say. This movie has some history. The movie then started. It panned down from the title card to an angel child in the forest. He was sitting on a log and a voice came down from the sky and said, "Are you saying your prayers?" The angel child lied and said, "Yes." The sky turned a slight red color. And the voice calmly said, "I know you're lying." The child curled up in a fetal position and started to cry. "What is this? This is kinda creepy," I heard coming from my friend. "Well, we're watching it anyways," I told him. I knew I recognized the voice in the movie, and it had just then dawned on me that it was Mr. Felmer, my 5th grade teacher. I still wonder why he would want to be in such a strange movie. After the opening scene, the animation got a lot worse. It's clear that it was made by only a small local team. The child was seen in a house in a small village. He nervously walked out of his house into the village, and everyone had stopped their activities. The child started to walk past all of them, but the townspeople surrounded him, beating him and shouting "Outcast." The townspeople all left suddenly, and the poor animation really showed here. Instead of walking, they all just dispersed, not moving their legs, almost like they were floating. The child was then left on the street, leading. There was no voice work done for the angel child, except for the crying, which made it even creepier to watch. The same voice from the sky, Mr. Felmer, spoke again, saying, "You must live your life as an outcast with nothing to offer to humanity. You must offer all that you have to God." The child looked up, clearly questioning him, and the voice said, "You've made your choice." The angel child was then shown in the same forest as the one shown in the beginning. The sky was an even darker red, and storm clouds above started to rain fire. The forest started to burn down, and the angel child started to weep even harder as the flames closed around him. Other things happened in the movie, but this is all I can remember. The full thing is roughly 30 minutes long. When the movie ended, my friend turned to me and said, "What is this?" "You found it at a flea market." I then came clean and told him everything. He didn't seem to mind the stealing part at all. We talked about it for a while, but we were interrupted by a tap on the window. I would usually ignore things like hat, but I was on edge. I looked outside and nothing was there. I closed the blinds and heard a laugh. It sounded like whoever laughed found something legitimately funny. I opened the blinds faster than I could think and saw nothing again. My friend, hearing the same thing, turned on the back porch light. We didn't see anything for a while, but eventually we heard a voice saying in a child's mocking tone, "You can't get me." We saw a faint shadow emerging from the darkness into the light. From seeing this, I almost completely forgot about the tape. In my mind, these events weren't connected at all. The man walked onto the porch and tried to force himself through the window. We shoved him out and simultaneously shouted threats about calling the police. The man then ran off. my Friday. And then I sat down on his couch and talked about calling the police. We decided not to because my friend was a bit of a drug addict. It was nothing serious, but the police would smell the weed and decide there wasn't any man in our backyard. In the first place, we were just paranoid. Without being able to call the police, we sat down by the back door and decided to stay up all night with our own respective weapons in hand. I called my mom and told her I'd be staying the night at my friend's. My friend and I stayed up for a few hours, but we couldn't make it close to staying up the whole night. We woke up and found the tape gone. That was the moment I realized that the tape was behind everything. I noticed another tape in the VCR. It was an advertisement for Children of God Elementary. I had seen the ad before, but after the last shot, a voice said, "Don't steal from us, punk." I thought about bringing this to the police, but I'd just be showing them a tape that accuses me of stealing. I found that tape about 6 hours ago, and I'm still at my friend's house. There's been a car parked outside his house since I woke up. I can't lay Ave the house, and if I told anyone what happened, they'd just scold me for stealing. I'm telling this story online not because it's a work of fiction, but because it's the only place where I can tell people what happened and remain anonymous. So please, if you come across this school or, by chance, the movie, stay as far away from it as you can. Story 3, Diplomat Hotel. There's his famous haunted hotel in the Philippines. It's named Diplomat Hotel. I am not sure about its history since word-of-mouth information tend to distort real history. All I know is that it was an old seminary for Jesuit priests about a decade ago, just about when the city Baguio City was founded. It was abandoned for some reason. They said there was a fire back then. It turned into some sort of hospital during the Second World War. The Philippines was greatly affected then. It was in this city where the great General Yamashita officially surrendered. Many, of course, perished in the city, making it one of the most haunted cities in the country. After being used as a hospital, it was renovated into a hotel. I am pretty sure the hotel bit is true because the place had been obviously divided into small rooms like a hotel, and each room had its own bathroom. The reception area, which was made of stone, still stands. As many know, the Philippines is a tropical country, making the most part of it hot and humid. The city of Baguio is located in the mountains, having cooler climate. It only made sense that they made that building a hotel for visitors from the lowlands during hot summers. Back to the hotel. In 1990, there was a catastrophic earthquake that hit the city. Again, thousands perished. The hotel was not spared, but it still stands. Rumors say that during the earthquake, September 1990, there were plenty of visitors in the hotel. A stampede had broken out, people frantically running from the building. As still seen today, there are only 3 exits in the building, all of them small and narrow. You can well imagine the carnage of people stepping on people. This adds to the creepiness of the building. HTI lines stands today only a 5-minute walk from our house. As children, we were mischievous and playful. Me, my cousin, and to neighbors being near that place. We often went there during summer to have a picnic or to play hide and seek. The place isn't that creepy in the morning. Yuji, our half-Japanese neighbor, was the first in our group I have one of those camera phones from Japan. We fooled around with it, recording each and one of us playing around, etc. Our other neighbor, John, had the idea of recording at Diplomat Hotel to see if we can catch a ghost. Off we went. We were around 8 or 9 back then and had heard plenty of scary stories and seen videos from the then slow internet. We were spooked to go inside the hotel despite it being in the middle of the day. Somehow the hotel that we treated as a playground had turned into what it was, a haunted hotel. Too freaked out, we didn't go inside. Instead, we started recording outside, around the building. It had a very wide driveway going around. We went around, singing and goofing off. At the back of the building, the northeast corner, the phone had turned off. We blamed John for probably pressing something accidentally, making the phone turn off, since he was the one holding the phone. We continued walking, and there was suddenly a cold gush of wind rushing up my skirt. I felt icy cold fingers touch my ankles. I panicked and started to run. The boys followed. It was when we're well out of the compound, when we got the phone to start again, when we got home, when we noticed a white, fleeting figure crossing one of the tall, narrow windows of the front of the hotel during the beginning of the video. At the end, the video just stopped. That's when the phone had turned off. We showed the video to our families, who were equally as spooked as we were. But none were really surprised. The place had a reputation. Fast forward to pre-adolescence. I was in the 6th grade, and it was nearly Halloween. The hype for scary stuff started again. My classmates from school knew I lived near Diplomat Hotel. They asked me to accompany them there. I had Beck. I'm a tour guide of the place. There were 3 of us, all girls, and it was a school day. We were in uniform. Rosemary brought with her one of those cameras with films. We had started taking pictures, all of us present in all photos. There was no one else present in the hotel. Somewhere in the lobby area of the building, near the fireplace, the camera had started acting fun. Why, it was turned on but didn't click to take pictures. We started fumbling with it in a circle when it suddenly flashed in front of our faces. The northeastern corner of the building was used as a small chapel. At the end of the room there was a table, probably used for ceremonies. There were long benches into rows on each side of the table. We had started fooling around there. Rosemary was the cameraman. I pretended to be some sort of priest while Rochelle pretended to be my one and only follower. I took my place behind the table and Rochelle sat in front of the row. Rosemary took only one photo in that room, since we're saving up on film for the rest of the hotel. The next day at school, Rosemary showed Rochelle and me the prints from the film. Everything seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary. She was even showed us the horrible photo of our faces looking down on the camera when it had started acting funny. The inside of our noses were illuminated and our eyes were diluted from the flash. The last photo was a blank. It was plain white. Rochelle asked, "How come the printing shop made Rosemary pay for a blank photo?" There was nothing in it. Rosemary explained that the photo was not supposed to be blank, but the film refused to be printed. She brought out the negative that we used at the hotel. At the end of the film, the negative image showed the chapel on the northeast corner of the building. Rosemary swore she only took one shot of the place and showed us the photo of us mimicking a ceremony on the center of the negative. Behind the table where had I stood was an odd-looking lady with long hair. She didn't have a face. Her arms were outstretched upward as if giving some sort of offering to a god. We could see what or it was something light-colored. We didn't know what color it was exactly because it was a negative. There was a dark sash that tied the robe around her waist. That didn't look like the uniform we wore that day. Every other detail of the negative, like the tree branches outside, her fingers, the woman's unruly hair, the scratches on the old table were all visible. But we could not see a face. Rosemary said that the negative would always come hot blank if they tried to print it. She still has the negative today, high school, senior year. Another set of friends, the same hotel, were curious of the place. Michelle, Divina, and Rochelle visited my home after school and wanted to see Diplomat Hotel. This time, no camera, since the intended visit was my home, not a spooky hotel. I was showing them around, telling them the usual scary stories I heard from other people who came to the place. I also told them of my own encounters. It was in the afternoon and sun was about to set. Nothing unusual was happening until Divina, who was lagging behind us, admiring the vintage white walls, suddenly ran forward, passing me who was leading the group. We just exited the chapel on the northeastern corner of the building when Divina ran. The other girls, without explanation, ran with Divina to the main entrance. I followed them there. I asked Divina why she ran. She said something cold touched her ankle. I asked the others if they felt anything. They felt nothing, but ran because they got spooked by Divina getting spooked. We had a laugh, but deep inside, I began getting creeped out. Home we went. School project. A music video for music class. My best friend, Micah, was our talent. She sang for the project. The rest of us, lines be doing the video. Francis, Jeremy, Kate, and I went to Diplomat Hotel. There were a few people in the hotel. It was a little nosy because of the tourists, but we didn't since we were going to use the recording of the song for the music video. The song was about the best friend falling in love with his girlfriend. Francis was the friend, Jeremy the best friend, Kate the girl friend of Francis. We didn't take a lot of videos inside because Kate felt shy shooting with a bunch of tourists around the place. So we decided to do most of the shooting outside where the hotel gardens were. This time the gardens were at the northwestern part compound. I was the cameraman. It took us only an hour to shoot everything we needed. We still had time, so we shot some bloopers at the garden. When it was time to edit the videos, I felt curious about our shots. We must have caught something like before. I watched all the videos twice, one in normal speed. The others are a little slower, nothing. So I went on with the editing. I added in the beginning of the first blooper we made. There was a deep grunting sound just before we laughed in the video. The second one also had grunting noises, only it happened in between me and Jeremy talking in the video. The last was the creepiest. Just before another round of laughter, a child's voice whispered, "Help me." When I showed my family and friends the video, they told me that I was the one whispering, but I explained to them how could I whisper that when immediately after it I was laughing with the rest of my group mates. They listened to the audio again and were convinced that I couldn't have done that. Sadly, the file was corrupted and no longer retrievable. There had been plenty of investigations conducted in that building, but none had really explained why would a child's voice be whispering to me in English. Mind you, we speak Tagalog or Ilocano in our area, when the building had been a priest's seminary, a hospital, and a hotel. Could she be the same spirit, touching our ankles and lifting skirts when I was younger? Who was that woman in the negative? Why was she wearing a priestly-looking robe? There weren't any female priests there. And what was that grunting noise? The hotel now has been renovated into a multi-purpose hall by the government, and, with special permits, people are allowed to camp inside the abandoned building so tourists would have scary stories of their own. Admin note: the Diplomat Hotel is a real place. If you found this author's experiences intriguing, you may be interested in the following post from Travel in Boots. 30 creepy but lovely photos of the haunted Diplomat Hotel in Baguio. Enjoy. Story 4. Chosen. There are winds of destiny that blow when we least expect them. Sometimes they gust with the fury of a hurricane, sometimes they barely fan one's cheek. But the winds cannot be denied, bringing, as they often do, a future that is impossible to eye. Nor Nicholas Sparks' message in a bottle. Do you remember your 6th birthday? You were probably uncontainably elated, diving into a small mountain of delicately wrapped presents, exhuming each and every one with more excitement and joy than the last. Maybe you remember sitting in a dark room, lit only by the faint incandescence of 6 glowing candles, giggling and kicking your feet as your entire family sung to you before blowing them all out and making your wish. Or perhaps you have fond memories of being chased around the house by a firing squad of party poppers, becoming almost entombed in a cascade of tinsel and confetti. Much to your delight, I truly hope that that is the case. If it is, I am happy for you, and I am glad your early years were filled with happiness. Unfortunately, I remember turning 6 for an entirely different reason. Don't get me wrong, my 6th birthday party was great. Probably I don't really remember it, so I can't tell you. I do recall eating smashed cake from off of the top of my head, if that's any indication, and it was real windy that day, like gale force. I guess turning 6 isn't particularly memorable for anyone, but it's almost as if what happened to me that night made the events seem so insignificant that I didn't commit them to even the vaguest of memories. By shocking contrast, what happened that is something I will never, ever forget. You see, that was the night that I was visited. Birthday boys didn't get any special treatment in my household. The party was over, and I was in bed by 8 o'clock, just like every other night. But this wasn't at all like any other night. I thought I heard the sound of something scraping against my window, a kind of scratching sound, like an old record jumping. My mother assured me it was a tree branch, and exhausted from my exciting day, I quickly fell asleep. I don't know if it was the cold that woke me up, the sound of the wind howling through the open window, or the billowing curtains, but my eyes bolted open, and my sheets were stuck to me by a cold sweat. That wind, it was horrifying. It froze me solid. It was so damn cold, and I swear I could hear 1,000 pained screams calling out my name, floating on its haunted breath, seemingly 1,000,000 miles away. A quick glance at my wall clock revealed I'd be asleep for a grand total of 6 minutes. My entire room was covered in a thick frost, and I could see my breath freezing in front of my face. Worst of all, I couldn't move, not even an inch. I could swivel my eyes in my head, but that was the limit of my movement. All of this on its own, as I'm sure you can imagine, would be certifiably terrifying, especially for a young child. Let me clear a few things up. My birthday is the 22nd of June. There's no way it was cold enough out for my whole room to freeze the fuck over in such a short amount of time. And why the hell was my window open in the first place? My mom drew the curtains every night and made sure my window was shut tight. It could only be opened from the inside, and yet there I was, opened as far as it would go. Nothing made sense, and I was so petrified I tried screaming, but I couldn't make sound. I tried shutting my eyes as hard as I could, as if trying to walk from a bad dream. But this was very, very real. The frost, chilling me to the bone, was real. The Baltic wind surging in through the impossibly opened window, whispering my name, that was real. Whatever Washington s holding me down, whatever was stopping me from calling to my mother, that had to be real. That's when it drifted in through the window. That thing, and believe me, I've prayed every night since that he isn't real. The first thing I noticed was his head, or what little of it there was. His skin bore the complexion of something dead and rotten, covered in stripping patches and sickly yellow in color. It was wrinkled and covered in moles, like it had once belonged to an old man, perhaps in his 90s. The skin around its eyes was completely absent, as if it had been gruesomely clawed and ripped away, revealing yellowed bone, despite its eyeballs being completely intact. Its most disturbing feature by far was that its entire lower jaw had been messily ripped off, leaving it dry, black tongue dangling from its mouth. Its head, logically, was then followed by its body, or at least what I assume was its body. Around the creature's veiny, pallid neck was a tattered silk robe, which seemed even darker than the darkness itself. It was covered in all sorts of grime, and it even had a few holes in it, through which I could see its desiccated chest. Dark, rotting skin stretched tight over broken ribs. The robe continued downwards until it became nothing more than shreds, barely dangling from the main body, and hanging below them, scraping along my windowsill before messily hitting my floor, was a length of black, centipede-ridden intestines. I waited for its legs to follow, but they never did as far as I know. It doesn't have any, and it apparently doesn't need them. It floated further into my room and hovered right above my face, extending a decaying arm, practically dripping with lumps of decrepit flesh from under its robes, and placing it on my shivering forehead. Then it drew its face in close to mine, and I realized the true horror of its visage. The eyes, oh God, the eyes, they weren't cold like an animal's, and no, I didn't see an eternity of endless suffering behind them, or my future, or the meaning of the universe. They were just a pair of perfectly normal, grassy green eyes. They seemed fresh and young compared to the rest of its body, at least, almost like a child's eyes, wet and glistening. That was the most disturbing part. Something so vile, something so rancid and abhorrent, and yet it possessed the most beautiful human eyes I have ever seen. Something so wicked shouldn't have eyes like that. It's just wrong. It lowered itself to my side, producing another arm, this one split directly down the middle as if it had been sawed in half, and placed one bony, feculent hand on either side of my ear. Then it started whispering in angry, cursing tones, boo, tea as gently and as subtly as a gust of wine on a summer's day. Even without a jaw it could speak, likely in the same way it could move without legs, but I still smelt the sour stench of death on its breath as its ice-cold wheeze brushed against my ear. At that point I started to become hysterical. I tried my hardest to scream. I tried to thrash around and kick out my arms and legs, but Washington S. still paralyzed, frozen under that thing's will. Then the whispering abruptly stopped. The being floated up from my bedside and slowly began to recede back through the window, the thick layer of icy he withdrawing with it into the night from whence it came. It never stopped facing me. Its icy glare never released its hold on me, not until its entire body had become invisible in the darkness outside my house. As soon as the final glints from its unnatural eyes had ceased, and the last of the frost had melted away, there was a massive gust of wind, and the windows slammed shut within, forced to shatter the pane of glass. I suddenly felt sensation in my limbs once more, and I felt the warm rush of blood in my throat. I screamed so hard I almost burst a lung. Of course, my mother eventually came and gave me some comforting words. It was all a dream, she'd said, blaming the broken window on some disrespectful youths who'd decided to vocalize just how lame my party had been with a brick. I didn't sleep that night or the night after. I was just too horrified. I thought that every time I slept, that thing would visit me. I dreaded falling asleep more than anything. I was utterly inconsolable. According to my mom, I cried for 2 days straight, refusing to tell her what I'd seen. Really fucking horrifying stuff. Anyway, that was TW. 12 years ago now. I eventually recovered, but I never truly forgot what happened that night, despite never seeing the apparition again. I've been to several doctors, and they've all given me the same diagnosis: sleep paralysis. It's not uncommon to visualize terrifying images while in this state, they told me. For a while I actually believed that it had all been some vivid hallucination, but I know that's not true. I was also completely unable to recall what the specter had whispered to me that night. Maybe it was because I'd completely ignored what the fuck it was saying. I was just trying to find a way to wake up from that living nightmare. But some of my psychologists suggested that I had blocked the memory from my mind to prevent my brain further trauma. I even tried being hypnotized to see if I could coax it out from the recesses of my subconscious, but it was all fruitless in the end. That's the end of the story, more or less. I'm sorry it doesn't have a more satisfying conclusion, like the thing snatching my throat out and drinking my blood or dragging me into the depths of hell. This is something that has seriously affected my life, and I hope you can appreciate that it is something that, to me at least, is chilling to the very soul. There is one thing, however, that I must add. Admittedly, it's the reason I took to writing this all up in the first place. I just can't get it out of my head. When I woke up this morning, this chant, I guess, was ringing in my head, reverberating in my mind. I was practically singing it in the shower. Only when I stopped to actually listen to what I was saying did it strike me I can't prove it, but I know where I've heard these words before. That fateful night 12 years ago. Son of earth, you are yet a child, and so, too frail for our embrace beguiled. The cloth pulled down over your eyes, the lips with which you suckle lies. We must snatch these sordid things away, for you to see true light of day. Still too young, not ready yet to join our most enlightened set. But when, dear boy, you are a man, and need no longer of your mother, we will come for you, my clan, and at long last shall call you brother. I turned 18 this morning, and all day I swear I've heard my name floating on the wind. Closer now and angrier. Story 5. Superpowers.avi. This is, by reputation, a website for fictional horror stories that might make you look over your shoulder or turn the lights back on a few times. But I wanted to take this time to assure you that everything you're about to read is true. Yeah, they all say that. But trust me, I wouldn't make this up if I could. So one day, when I was still in high school, I had to go to the library for some project or another, for some class or another, because it required the use of the internet, and my mom used our home computer for work. Once I got to the library, I noticed that there was no one in there, not even a librarian. This seemed a little strange, but the door was unlocked, and there were still 5 hours or so until they closed. So I shrugged it off and found a computer to work. I decided on the clunker in the far corner of the library and plugged my headphones into the headphone jack on the computer tower, as I needed find some videos of something, I'm not sure. I never got that far, and by that I mean I decided to postpone working on whatever project it was I needed to finish, and instead did some snooping. I'll be honest, I didn't really expect to find anything, but I figure it'd make a nice story. Some creep had accidentally downloaded porn onto the library computer, and I'd happened across it. I was 16. This was my idea of a good time. I tried the text file folder first, but to no avail. Nothing there except some book report someone forgot to delete after they turned it in. Then I went for the images. Again, nothing. I think there was a picture of a Weimaraner, but I can't be sure I'm remembering correctly. It was when I got to the video folder that things got interesting. There was one video in the folder, and the title struck me as odd because it looked like it had been renamed. The title read Superpowers.avi. I was intrigued, but at this point had given up on my dream of discovering neckbeard, Cheeto finger porn. So I clicked on the video, skeptical that it'd be anything worth watching. The thing that struck me right away was the quality. It was awful. Even for 2009, there were maybe 300 pixels on the entire screen. It was so bad. The only thing I could really make out was that the video seemed to have taken place on an elementary school playground, or maybe in a residential park with swings and a slide. The video was just over 12 minutes long, and I highly doubted that I'd watch the entire thing, especially if the quality stayed this bad. The audio was listenable, however, so I figured I'd give it a chance. Right away I heard a distinctly male teenage voice, and I guessed that I saw him as well, but the quality made it to where I wasn't sure he was talking about school, I think. some guy who needed his ass kicked, or some girl who wasn't putting out. Camera guy agreed with a definitive yeah, and I was highly disinterested to say the least. Then they started doing flips off the sly. Of course, they're the hardcore parkour type. Why wouldn't they be? The only thing that kept me watching was the significant spike in video quality. In an instant, the quality went from unwatchable to box office smash. This was some serious improvement. I'm not sure how it happened, but at the time I don't think I bothered questioning it. The point is, this piqued my interest, and Flip Guy was kind of funny, so I kept watching. I got a good look at him for the first time and noticed a few things. He had shortish brown hair that was kinda spiked up, kinda just unruly, was wearing the tightest jeans I'd ever seen, and seemed kinda tall for his age. His age was indeterminate, though, as he had the face of a 12-year-old, but the stubble of a 19-year-old. He sounded about 16, though, so I'll guess he was about the same age as me with weird genetics. Anyway, Flip G earned his name. He backflipped off the slide, off the monkey bars, off the benches, everywhere. Then he tried to flip off of the platform separating the slide from the monkey bars, and something went wrong. The platform was about 4.5 or 5 feet up, and I could tell midair that he wasn't going to land the flip. He landed face down in the wood chips, and I heard a hunch. I had seen him put his hands down to brace himself, so I was sure he had broken one, if not both, of his wrists. Flip Guy didn't scream. Camera guy did. After a few seconds, Flip Guy rolled over, and with a dangling, undeniably broken wrist, gave a thumbs up while flashing a winning smile. I was filled with several emotions at this point, not the least of which being repulsion, but also not the least of which being admiration. He didn't seem fazed at all. Camera guy eventually calmed down after relentless panicking, and Flip Guy legitimately got up and tried again. This is where things get weird. Flip Guy gets back up and climbs to the top of the platform and decides to jump off again. I think it's important to note here that this is the first time he's been silent for more than 30 seconds since the video started, and with it being the time most people would make the most noise, I was honestly starting to worry. So he jumps and does a perfect flip in midair, but far overshoots his mark and flips too much, landing on his back right at the edge of the wood chips and smacking his head hard on the hard plastic border separating the wood chips from the grass. This makes the most sickening sound I'd ever heard. Camera guy screams again and rushes over to his friend, who has now started bleeding, and I mean a lot, all over the ground. I start to feel less hicky, wondering if I'd just watch someone die, and Flip Guy's eyes open. They look considerably more shielded, almost glazed over, that where you can still see the life within them, even if just barely. There's no at this point that he made out without a fractured skull, or worse. Camera guy keeps asking him if he's okay. Fucking idiot, just call the ambulance. Your friend's losing a lot of blood. But then, and I have no clue how, Flip Guy sits up again. Camera guy had been in the grass, looking at Flip Guy head first, so when Flip Guy sat up, the wound was in full view. And what a wound it was. There was a massive hole in his head, causing blood to pour down his shirt. His brown hair was almost black around the wound from how much blood was in it. All this on top of the broken wrist he already had was more than enough for me to start feeling nauseous. and more than a little morbidly pessimistic with where this is going. Flip guy gets up. I have no clue how, but he gets up and starts limping toward the platform, not saying a word. His demeanor has visibly changed, unsurprisingly, but his new demeanor is horrifying. Imagine a kid with a broken wrist and a hole in his head nearly half a foot wide, lumbering towards something with a nearly dead look in his eyes, all while completely silent. Camera guy has finally stopped blubbering and cold he cops. His friend falls over not a foot from the platform and rolls over onto his back before he starts seizing, spasming uncontrollably and foaming from his mouth. Camera guy drops the camera and SP rents over to his friend, who you can barely see in the corner of the frame. As soon as he touches Flip guy, who I've learned from frantic screaming his name, Anthony, everything changes. Anthony's completely incapacitated, all but dead, on the ground, and his friend crouches next to him before laying his hands on Anthony's chest, panicking and unsure of what to do. As soon as his hands touch Anthony, he's thrown into the air at least 40 feet and comes down as hard as you'd imagine, if not harder. Right on his head, there's a succession of crunches and ts as he hits about 5 feet from the camera, and he's stopped moving. His face is shown for the first time, and it looks deflated, blood trickling lazily from the nose in stark contrast to the overwhelming surge that was just shown from Anthony's head. By now I want nothing more than to turn this off and discover it was just a nightmare, but I can't bring myself to do that. The CZNG stops nearly off camera, and Anthony raises himself as though pulled by a string attached to the center of his chest. His head slowly turns toward the body of his friend, and from what I can see, there is no remnants of humanity left in him. He stands up slowly and begins to stagger toward the camera and the body. Once he reaches what was once his friend, he reaches into the front pocket and extracts a pocket knife. I can't bear to watch this, but I can't turn it off, and so I'm stuck, held hostage by this light-hearted video turned snuff film. Anthony opens the knife and, in a twist, buries it into his own arm. He doesn't flinch as he carves a straight line from elbow to wrist on each arm and finally lays it to rest handle deep in the hollow, his throat between his collarbone. He stands, staggers a bit, and finally falls down to his hands and knees before succumbing to blood loss and collapsing on the grass, a pool of deep red surrounding him. You can hear sirens in the distance, getting closer before the camera's battery dies and the screen goes black. I'm nearly hysterical at this point, shaking uncontrollably as I make my way out of the still empty library and onto the street. I nearly call my mom to pick me up and take me somewhere safe, somewhere I don't have to think, but decide on using the short walk home to sort my thoughts. I begin the Washington LK, leaving my body on autopilot and relying on it to get me home. I start to calm down a little bit and think of rational explanations for this, like maybe it was a school project or a prank left there to terrify whatever unsuspecting library-goer happened to stumble upon it. I'm fully satisfied with these explanations. Then I pass the park down the road from my house and see the police tape. My heart skips a beat as I look closer and realize that the slide at the park is the same color as the one in the video, and there are exactly as many swings as there were in the video. there are two bodies lying side by side, just like Anthony and his friend. I don't dare get closer than I am now, but even from a distance I can make out an object lying on the grass a few feet away from the bodies. It's a video camera. Story 6. Why exercise is bad for you. It all started when I got fat. I had been wanting to lose weight for a while, but being a not exactly starving artist, I didn't have the money to join a gym or buy equipment of my own. Yeah, I could have gone running, but who wants to do that? Not me. Never could run as a kid, so I was pretty sure I wouldn't be able to as an adult. That was when I decided to check out Craigslist to see if there was any free equipment that wasn't too ancient. I didn't want to end up with one of those shake the fat away machines. You know, the one with the belt. Yeah, no thanks. Anyway, I was lucky enough to find an elliptical that someone was giving away for free. What luck, right? From what I saw in the pictures, it looked to be a few years old. One of the speakers on it was busted, but I didn't have an MP3 player to hook into it anyway. I decided to give the seller a call. After talking on the phone to a woman named Jeanette, a time was set for me to go to her home and pick up the elliptical. She sounded strangely relieved to be getting rid of the equipment, but I was too excited to be getting it for free that it really didn't faze me at the time. So that Friday, I borrowed my dad's truck and some rope and headed out to get my new treasure. On the way, I thought of how in a few short weeks I would be on my way to a swimsuit season bod. I already had my mind set that I would buy a cute bikini. After driving for around a half hour, flipping a couple UEs and stopping at Stop S, Higgins long enough to be honked at, I made it to Jeanette's. Surprisingly, she was waiting outside. I thought it was a little odd, but again, I didn't pay much attention. Jeanette looked 500 to be in her mid-50s and about 5 feet 6 inches. Her skin was a bit pale, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was a little unkempt, and it sort of looked as if she had just then thrown on whatever clothes she could find. Jeanette. I held out my hand to shake hers. Yes, hello, she said quietly. Her handshake was soft and reserved, and she had a bit of a worried look in her eye. Please come in. I followed her into the house and then into the living room. There it stood in all its free glory. Nietzsche, I said, eyeing up the elliptical. Okay. Hey then, would you like me to help you out with it? She asked quickly and nervously. Oh, yeah, sure, thanks. I was a little surprised that she hadn't offered any kind of reason why she would be getting rid of the machine for free. So I asked. Oh, she said nervously, it just takes up too much space, and I don't really need the money. I can't see getting much for it anyway. She kind of half smiled and began to try and lift the back end of the machine. I rushed over to assist. After a few minutes and a lot of heave-hoing, we eventually got the elliptical into the bed of the truck. I thanked her once again and headed home. The machine sat in the bed of the truck until my boyfriend made it over to my apartment. It took a few tries and some remembering of high school geometry, but we successfully got it through the door and into the living room. I looked it over, and, like I saw in the pictures online, the only thing wrong with it was the one broken speaker. Other than that, it was absolutely perfect. Here I come beach body. I jumped on and started pressing buttons. Okay. This one tracks your heartbeat. This one shows how many calories you burn. My boyfriend laughed at me and told me I looked like a kid at Christmas. After a little while, he left for work and I was left to play with my new toy. I had apparently worked out a little too hard because by 9:00 p.m. I was pooped and collapsed on my bed. The next thing I remember was waking up to a strange nose. In a daze, my brain tried its damnedest to figure out what the sound was. Has the faucet on? Was it raining outside? I opened one eye and looked at my window. I could see the moon. No clouds. The more I came out of my slumber, the clearer the whooshing sound got, and I realized what it was, the elliptical. Ugh, John, what the hell? I am trying to sleep, I said, assuming my boyfriend had come back over and decided to fool around on the machine. The whirring didn't stop. John, I yelled. It still didn't stop. I decided, gradually, to get up and throw something at him. Joe. I stopped mid-name as I turned the corner into the living room. No one was here. The machine wasn't moving at all, and the whirring had stopped. John, I said quietly and confused. No one answered. I decided it must have been some kind of goofy dream. I went to my front door to make sure the lock was still on. It was, and then went back into my room. The rest of the night was quiet. The next morning I woke up with the sun on my face. I instantly remembered the night before, but I did to shrug it off. I stood up and moaned. I was so sore, but I needed to keep a tight exercise schedule. If I wanted buns of steel by May, I'd change out of my pajamas and into my worko clothes, blasted some music, and hop on the machine. As I went to press the button to turn on the machine, I noticed that there were steps logged in the system. I knew I had cleared it out the night before and shut it down. I figured it was probably a glitch, one of the reasons it was free. But in the back of my mind I still held on to what had happened the night before. After my workout, I once again cleared the screen and turned off the machine. I went into the bathroom and was about to step into the shower, and I again heard the familiar whooshing sound and a towel. I ran into the living room and came around the corner just in time to see the machine moving. I froze. What the hell did I just see? I thought to myself. I gathered my courage and walked toward the Maki. It was still. I looked at the screen and it was lit up with a log of 10 steps. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Was there some kind of speed setting or something? I checked the screen, still in my towel, and tried to find anything that would be an auto setting. As I figured, there was no setting other than resistance. No speed. It was all manually powered. I turned the machine off and a bit again went back into the bathroom and took my shower. Later that evening, my boyfriend, John, came over after work. We had a nice meal and decided to sit down in the living room and watch a movie. I believe it was called The Shrine. As I recall, it was a pretty freaky movie, but that could be because I was on edge all evening from my mishap with the machine earlier that day. As we sat, cuddled up on the couch, I started to smell something. I kept sniffing to the point my boyfriend asked if I needed a tissue. I said no, of course, and told him I smelled something. He ifed to and made a face. Geez, I know you have been working out, Tan. That is great, but you really need to take showers afterward. John laughed It isn't me. I paused the mo. Why? Well, it isn't me either, John said. I sniffed around the couch. It didn't seem to be coming from that area, so I got up, and as Took and Sam would say, I followed my nose. The stench brought me to the elliptical. What the hell? I said softly. What is it? John said from across the room. It is coming from the elliptical, I said. Just as fast as the smell came on, it was go. I sniffed and couldn't find a trace. The incident from earlier, and this phantom smell got me to thinking of Jeanette. She seemed so shifty. Maybe there was another reason she wanted to get this cursed ghee. 1,000 equipment out of her house. The next day I decided to pay an unexpected visit to Jeanette. She answered the door with a smile. She looked well-rested and much less frazzled than before, as she saw me. However, the happy, rested look turned into a look of worrying. "Oh, hi, can I help you?" "Hello again," I said, smiling politely. "I was just wondering if you had a moment. I just have a couple of questions about the machine that I picked up the other day. May I come in?" She hesitated, then reluctantly welcomed me in. "Is the machine not working? If not, just take it to the junkyard. I don't want it back," she said quickly. "Oh, no, I said, still trying to be as polite as possible. "It isn't that at all." The worried look on her face turned to dread, and a knot began to form in my stomach. "Something wasn't right. Would you mind if we sit for just a moment?" "I really don't mean to intrude." Jeanette seemed to partially snap out of her funk and said, "Of course, let's sit in the dining room. I'll put on a pot of tea." She showed me into the dining room and told me to have a seat while she put the tea on. I sat for a few moments, and then my attention was grabbed by a photo on the wall. It was Jeanette and a man about the same age. I assumed it was her husband. A few minutes later, Jeanette shuffled into the dining room. "2 cups of hot tea. Good to have on a cold day like this," she said. Trying to hide her nervousness, I smiled and took a sip. "Is that your husband?" It almost seemed like yes. He jumped at the question. "I'm sorry." I pointed to the photo on the wall. Oh yes, sadly, he passed away a few months ago." She began to look even more nervous. "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that," I said, trying my best to look sympathetic. "How did he pass, if you don't mind me asking?" She closed her eyes. I thought she was going to start crying. I was about to say never mind when she let out a sigh. "Well," she said, "he had gained some weight, and the doctor said it would be a good idea to start getting some exercise into his schedule. You see, his weight was affecting his blood pressure, He sighed again and paused for a moment. "He actually had a heart attack and died while on that elliptical." I dropped my tea. Story 7. Snow. May 2014. I opened the door, and I was met with the cold blast of Antarctica's winter winds. I wasn't really sure why I was here. I just needed to get away from the others. This was my first stay over winter in the base. I did it to escape my previous life after basically going broke, and the divorce I just needed to escape. I was employed here as a maintenance worker. The pay was good, and since there was nothing to buy, I would have 6 months' worth of savings at the end. There were 36 other people at the base, none of which I particularly liked. Commander Evans didn't accept anyone questioning his command. Even when he was wrong, he was the reason I was probably out here. An argument with him. He asked me to fix the lights in the geology labs, as Norton wouldn't shut up about it. But I was already in the middle of fixing some of Bennett's meteorology equipment. I told him to get Ripley, Young, or Anderson, the other engineers here, but no, he asked me. Eventually we started arguing, and just as we were both about to start unleashing an hour's worth of built-up fury, Norton heard us and just told Evans it didn't matter. This just pissed Evans off even more, as he didn't like anyone telling him he wasn't Dr. fucking Manhattan. Eventually, I just left. I decided I needed to get out. It was dark outside, very dark. All I could see was snow whirling next to me, the lights of the base, and darkness. My destination was the tool shed. It was heated, of course, and I reckon that no one else would want to be out there. I didn't tell anyone where I would be. I just wanted to be left alone. I clipped my harness to the guide line, and I stumbled into the snow. It was hard enough walking into the blizzard anyway, and it was even harder with the heavy clothes I was wearing. Still, I'd be dead without them. It was about a 100-meter walk. I had a survival time of about 1 hour out here, if I wore all the correct equipment. I did, of course, while going out of the main building without telling anyone was strictly against the rules. I didn't care. The blizzard tore through me, and I was holding on for dear life to the rope as the increasing winds nearly took me off my feet. I slowly edged my way along the rope, although I couldn't see anything ahead of me other than the snow, the rope, and my hands. I was truly alone, apart from the 36 NT base. I was thousands of miles from anyone else. From then on, it was simple. I would move my hands forward and step, keeping a tight hold on the guide line. I nearly lost my grip at several occasions, and I was even blown off my feet at one point. But my safety wire saved me from getting lost in the infinite bleakness of the blizzard. Eventually I reached the building, and I pushed up, and the door, collapsing into the room. I slammed the door behind me. I began to discard my heavy outer gear. It was a cozy temperature. I let out a sigh of relaxation. The tool shed consisted of just a wall full of tools, one solitary window on the opposite side, and an extremely old TV with some DVDs next to them, 5 DVDs in all ones that we had a second hand copy of or were just unwatchable rubbish. The first was The Thing, which was of course popular down here in Antarctica. We watched it every year as part of a tradition. We watched it with The Shining, which we all found out since this base had its own caretaker named Bill Watson. However, while The Shining, Watson was an okay bloke, the one here was a dick. I had probably watched both about 10 times in 3 months, and I decided to just pick another DVD at random. I closed my eyes and randomly pointed at one of the DVDs. I opened my eyes and saw my index finger jabbing into the On the Battlefield Earth cover. I grabbed it, opened the door, and threw it out into Antarctica. I smiled as I hated the movie with a passion. Instead of bothering with picking randomly, I just picked up the Saturday Morning Watchmen DVD and jammed it into the DVD plate on the side of the telly. As the menu came up, I simply selected Play All just as I beg, and to lay back down. I had a part of me shouting that something was missing, but I just couldn't figure out what. Then I remembered cigarettes. I'd always been an avid smoker, so I was dismayed that they were banned in the base, of course. I had a pack or two smuggled away in the tool shed, so I pried open the loose panel and grabbed the last packet left, along with the lighter. I sat back and tea. At this moment, it seemed like everything was perfect, as Rorschach told Adrian to duck as he biffed a criminal in the face, as I inhaled the smoke, as the radiator kept everything warm. As I had been up for the last 20 hours, I fell asleep. It was all a series of unfortunate coincidences, wasn't it? That Evans picked me, that we argued, that I smoked, that I removed my tea. That half an hour after I went to sleep, my cigarette fell from my hands and into some helicopter fuel that had been left there without my knowledge. I think it must have been either Benton or Harvey. Either way didn't matter. The fact I didn't die of smoke inhalation was just luck. The sounds of Storm Saxon getting punched in the face by Dr. Manhattan shaped like a boxing glove woke me. I woke nearly instantly, though I was tired. I had the ability to wake up instantly. I looked around, and for a second I was utterly baffled as to what was going on. The fire had taken over an entire wall, engulfing my harness. I bolted upright and leapt for my coat. I threw it on my shoulders, and I slid my heavy snow boots on. I threw the door open, and I was met with the howling winds, making me stumble backwards towards the fire. I had to make a split-second decision: either stay in the shed, attempt to put the fire out, probably burn to death, or walk back to Amundsen Scott's main building without a harness, probably get lost in the snow, and die of hypothermia. You're thinking about it now, and whatever choice I make, I'll be ended an idiot for letting this happen in the first place. But you weren't here. You have all the time in the world to make your choice. I had seconds, if that. I chose the ice over the fire. I jumped out and grabbed the line. The winds were howling at me to let go, which would mean almost certain death without my harness. My hands gripped firmly onto the rope, and I slowly edged my way forward. Through just a few meters, the burning shed was lost in the flames. I thought for a second what punishment I would face from Evans, but I instantly went back to concentrating on survival. I hugged on to the line as the bitter cold dug into me. Even with my coat on, it was then that I slipped. My feet went flying off sideways, and my hands were hurting as the thin wire dug into them. My hands were tired. After just seconds, I knew if I let go, I was dead. The storm continued to batter into me, trying to convince me to let go. My feet weren't touching the ground. Instead, my knee was supporting me. I pushed up with my knee, and I was finally on to feet again. I was much more careful the second time, as I knew I was lucky to have this chance. My stance was wider, and I leant into the rope slightly. I put my left hand forward first, and I slowly released my right. I plodded my feet forward. I was freezing cold. I was wondering whether my hands had frostbite, but I knew wondering things like that wasn't going to help. I continued to march forward, slowly but surely, for about 20 meters or so. I wasn't even halfway, and all I could see in any direction was snow and darkness. I was beginning to whimper, both out of pain and the knowledge that I'd probably die here. I started talking to myself, giving myself some false reassurance. You can do it. Come on, do it. Nearly there. Come one. About 20 minutes later, After I had covered a mere 10 meters, I began to cry. I wasn't even halfway, and I was already beginning to give up. The tears froze on my face, causing even more pain. I screamed, why couldn't Evans just have asked Young? She was head maintenance worker anyway. That stupid, dumb cunt. Why couldn't he have just asked someone else? It was my fault, and I knew it, but having someone else to blame at least gave me a target. I imagined all the ways Evans could die painfully, and I must have covered 20 meters without realizing it. Then, as I was imagining Evans' head go flying from his body and crowds cheered, the storm picked up its intensity. It used to have bad, extremely bad, or maybe the wine just coincided with the flames somehow burning through the guideline. But whatever happened, the guideline broke at the tool stand. I fell to the ground. Yet, by some miracle, I was still holding on to the rope. I began to scream as the winds tried as they could to knock me off the wire, to send me spiraling into the unknown darkness of enter. CTIC ... For a single second, I had a moment of self-doubt that it would be so much easier to just let go. No, not now. I'm not just bloody dying here. Come on, you can. The winds disagreed with me as another gust caused me to let go. Now I was truly lost. Truly dead. I stood up and walked into the winds. Come on, there's got to be something. I closed my eyes as the snow stew. NG them. I knew my eyesight was useless now. I'll never know what exactly it was, but a piece of debris must have come loose from somewhere. Whatever it was, it smashed into my leg at breakneck speed. I howled it out in pain, and I fell. My leg was broken. I clawed my hands into the snow. Come on, come on, come on. There was that guy. They made a film about him, about how he broke his legs in some mountains, yet crawled his way to safety. His name was Joe or Simon. It doesn't matter. Come on, nearly. The wind made one final push, which forced me out of my weak grip on the ground and out into the infinite snow.